and then maybe.
All right, we are just about to start. Again, I'm Matt Hotho, the Director of Production and Online Engagement, and this is the Fostering Connections Seminar. We've got Thadeen and we've got Stephanie from California watching. If you're watching with us, again, let us know in the chat and where you're watching from. We're about to get started.
I think there's people that are still coming in. I don't want to close it once they start coming. And I'll just go ahead and start my introduction. I'm sure we'll have some people coming in. First and foremost, I had the flu like 2 weeks ago and I have a cough that's going to last forever. So I do have tea. It shouldn't cause too much coughing, but just as a heads up. And you guys are all safe in the front row. You are okay. I have my antibiotics. All good.
Now I feel better. Oh my God, I'm stuck with you.
3 weeks later, you're still coughing. And I have voice nodules, so my voice goes out a little bit when I cough. But should be good to go. For those of you I haven't gotten a chance to meet yet, my name is Erica Clark. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I have a practice here, a private practice here in Tampa. My physical office is, does everyone know where Jimbo's Barbecue is?
Oh, yeah.
The location that everyone knows. I'm right across the street from Jimbo's. So right near Lois and Kennedy. So I've been there for a couple years. Before that, I was over closer, kind of West Shore and Kennedy area. Been in private practice for about 10 years. Started out seeing both kids and adults. Now I only see adults primarily because I have my own kids and I like to be able to pick them up from school. Not because I don't like kids anymore, but because I like to be able to pick them up from school and most kids need afternoon hours or evening hours. So see all adults earlier in the day. I do talk a lot with parents though. One talk I gave here a couple months ago was actually on raising emotionally intelligent children. Being able to talk with kids and model emotional intelligence. A lot of times when I'm working with adults, if the kid's not doing well in their family, no one's doing well. And so a lot of times even just talking about adult things leads to talking about kid things. So I do a lot of parent support in that way. This talk though is based more on connection. To give you a little bit of background about me, again, I've been in private practice for about 10 years. Grew up in Tampa, born and raised here, actually attended this church. And then went away for school, went to Nashville, to Vanderbilt University there and did my undergrad in cognitive. I got a double major in cognitive studies and child development. Then went to Melbourne, Florida to Florida Tech and got my master's and doctorate degree in clinical psychology. From there, went to Florida State University and worked in their counseling center. So working with college students, which is something I still love doing. And then from there, for my residency, I went to Bay Pines VA. The Bay Pines VA I worked with in their PTSD unit, so it was active duty service members and veterans who would come. They have a really wonderful program at Bay Pines. It's about a 6-week inpatient program, so they come to a residential program, they come and stay there. We work with them through complex trauma, things like that, either military sexual trauma, so sexual trauma that happened while they were in the military, or combat trauma. And then the other side of that was working in the women's clinic, so veterans who would come in for their general women's exams or even just general illnesses, things like that. If they were having anything that psychologically they needed some support with, grief, anxiety, depression, sleep stuff, things like that, the MDs would send them my way. So great experience there. Again, then moved into private practice. One thing right off the bat I knew that I wanted to do was talks like this. And through Sally McGray, this is one of the first places in town I started doing that 10 years ago. In my mind, it's proactive. It's this idea of being able to give a lot of information that I typically give to clients within the first couple sessions to larger groups who may or may not ever see me as a therapist or anyone as a therapist, but could benefit from it, could pass it on to loved ones, family, friends, things like that. So this topic specifically is one that I really enjoy talking about because it's so, so important. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of it, I'm going to talk about what it looks like, and I'm going to talk about kind of how to do it. Okay, I'll go ahead and shut this door. I want you to feel free, if there's any questions or anything like that, feel free to jump in, cut me off, ask your question, or you make a note and ask at the end. I always like to stick around for a couple minutes at the end too. Sign-in sheet, you have it over there? Oh, you got it? I'll stick around at the end a little bit too, so if there's any question that you'd rather ask one-on-one, feel free to come up. The handout also has my email address on it. Feel free to email me. I can talk about this stuff all day long. So if you have questions that you have, that you want to ask, feel free to ask me. One thing that I also like to help people with, in my practice I don't take insurance, I do all private pay. There are plenty of great practitioners around town though who take insurance. And so if you're having a hard time finding someone for you or a loved one, and you don't want to pay out of pocket, email me. I'll help you find someone. There are plenty of people around, and if you have the insurance benefits to do it, why not do it? But again, something I'm happy to help with and have some colleagues who I tend to refer to and can help kind of guide you on the right path. Okay? All right, any questions before we jump in? All right, so are two things that I assess pretty immediately when I meet with a new client. If either of these things are lacking, there might not be a great deal of contentment, general well-being. So when we think of purpose, it's this idea of what brings fulfillment. What do we do that brings fulfillment? What are we passionate about? It could be one thing, it could be 10 things. It's even better if it's several things versus one thing. So we won't talk too much about the purpose side, but I do want to talk about it for just a minute because it shifts over time. So purpose when you have, when you're in school, is getting your work done, figuring out what you want to do career-wise. It could be making friends, finding connections, finding a partner for long term, things like that. The idea of purpose shifts when maybe you have your own kids and you're helping them, and then purpose shifts again as those kids don't need you as much. So this idea of purpose, it becomes really important to identify what your purpose is. Do you need some chairs? There's some extra over there. Yeah, so this idea of purpose, it becomes important just to reassess over time and to figure out where you're getting that sense of purpose. I tell this story with permission from the client. But a long time ago I was working with a college kid who found no sense of purpose in his academics. He was like, I'm here, I'm doing it. He was doing just fine academically, didn't fill him up. He was feeling some depression, he was feeling some anxiety, and we're thinking, okay, what are you going to use as your sense of purpose? What can you throw yourself into that makes a day worthwhile? He figured out his dog was his sense of purpose. He wanted to make sure his dog was having a really good life. And that became his thing. That was his reason for getting out of bed in the morning. Because he could get out of bed, he went to new different dog parks, he ended up actually finding community through it, because he found connection with other people who had dogs, who had different places to go, and for a period of time, that's what got him out of his depression and anxiety. And it built on that with other sense of purpose, sense of community connection. So it doesn't have to be your job. It doesn't have to be your family, but being able to find different areas where you feel fulfilled is really important in bolstering well-being. The other side of this is the community piece, connection. We all need it. I've had some clients who are on the more maybe introverted side who argue they don't need it. We do. And I'm going to talk in a minute about why it's so important. I'm a big fan of understanding the why so that we know why we want to do certain things. It's one thing to say you need to do this. It's another thing to say this is what the research says. This is why you really want to do it, and you can kind of get more of a buy-in that way, it just even internally. So sense of community becomes really important, and we want a lot of different connections. The idea even that people maybe who are more introverted don't need it, you don't need a lot of it, but you need some fulfilling connections. The biggest difference too between introverts and extroverts is not about sociability. It's not about how social you are. My guess is each of you probably knows someone who you can identify as an introvert who's actually awesome at socializing and actually seems like the life of the party and real bubbly. The only difference between introverts and extroverts is where you get your energy. So people who are introverted, they get their energy being alone. People who are extroverted feel drained when they're alone and need to be around people to fill up. You might fall somewhere on that spectrum too. It's not always totally black and white. And so just knowing where you are in that, you want to make sure, especially if socializing drains you, making sure you're prioritizing filling yourself up when you're on your own, but then also making sure that the interactions that you have are real quality interactions, because that in and of itself can fill you up. Okay? So here's the reasoning. This is the why. So Martin Seligman is a really phenomenal psychologist. He is really kind of at the forefront, or was at the forefront as it started, of positive psychology, which kind of came around in the 90s, and it's this idea, as opposed to just focusing on, maybe a little early, like 80s, instead of just focusing on depression, anxiety, grief, kind of bolstering what's going wrong, positive psychology says, let's look at what's going right, and let's enhance that too. So let's see what someone's strengths are, and let's enhance those versus just focusing on what's not going well. So Seligman wrote a really wonderful book called Flourish. In it, he talks about the 5 pillars of well-being: positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. So this is based on his research, and these are the 5 things to kind of bolster. But I want to talk for a minute about just the relationship piece of it. That's the idea of connection. So the quote he has is, "Other people are the best antidote to the downs in life and the single most reliable up." If you are feeling down, Connection is what's going to bring you up. Quality connection. Not, I'm just going to show up and talk to the person at the grocery store, but finding people who you can connect with. That's a great start. If that's all you have, do it. Have contact, have communication, have connection, even if it feels surface level. Just that idea of getting out of our own head, getting into a connection or conversation with someone else is a huge way to bolster us. So we know, and research shows, increased social connection leads to increased self-esteem, increased empathy, and increased cooperation. When we reduce social connection, increased stress and inflammation, this is in our bodies. Increased stress and inflammation, which we know leads to a whole host of things, digestion issues, things like that, suppressed immune system. Depression increases, anxiety increases, and then there's an increased risk of premature death. This one is one of the most interesting points to me, and I want to talk about the specific research on this because it's pretty interesting. So, in a study of 7,000 men and women in California, it was a 9-year study. The researchers found that people who were disconnected from others, who didn't have strong social ties, were roughly 3 times more likely to die during the 9-year study than people with strong social ties. 3 times more likely to die. The other piece, and this is an interesting one, so that difference in survival was regardless of age, gender, health practices, physical status, anything like that. It's just the social connection they isolated. Interestingly though, those with close social ties, so people who are connected, in unhealthy lifestyles, smoking, obesity, lack of exercise, actually live longer than those with poor social ties and more healthy living habits. This does not mean because obviously the ones with both healthy lifestyle and close social ties live the longest. But we can do everything to take care of our body, but that idea that it impacts our well-being, our health, our longevity, that's big, and that's the why that I wanted to drive home, because this stuff means something. This stuff is essentially a matter of life and death. And so, again, if you're sitting there and you're taking care of your body, and you're doing all these things, but you're feeling so isolated, and you're feeling so alone, it gives a little bit more motivation to this idea of, let's find some connection somewhere. And it doesn't need to be a ton of them. That's not something you have space for. 1 or 2 connections can make such a difference. And you want to be able to take a social inventory and be able to see which connections you have are maybe ones that don't really fulfill you or don't really fit anymore. And we'll talk about setting boundaries with those, but it's not about quantity, it's about quality in those connections. Interestingly, in another study, there's this Nobel Prize winner, he's a psychologist, and his name is Dan Kahneman, but he did another study that showed that intimate relationships and socializing are the 2 most positive activities you can do in a day to increase your well-being, like feeling happy, experiencing warm, friendly feelings. Interestingly, participants got the biggest boost from friends and relatives, followed by significant other and children. This does not mean don't hang out with your spouse and your family. What this means is we get desensitized. That's the hypothesis behind this, is we get desensitized to the people we're around all the time. So this idea of spouse, family members, people in our home, if there are people in the home, it doesn't give us the same kind of boost as when we meet a friend for coffee, or we meet a friend out at an event like this, or we take a couple minutes before or after church to talk to someone for a few minutes. Those are different types of socializations than the kind of more comfortable that you have in the home. And so that novelty is what brings even a bigger boost. So some food for thought is you might be surrounded by family, but it might be worth bolstering some of those other connections as well. But again, hang out with your family too. That's important. Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about types of community, because the hope is, and the best situation is that we have lots of different buckets to pull from. Even with my kids, this is something that I'm trying to be really mindful of. I have a 4- and a 6-year-old. I don't want them only hanging out with school friends. There's going to be drama. There always is, and there's, I'm on the outs with this group this week, or whatever it might be as they get older. I want them to have neighborhood friends. I want them to have maybe Sunday school friends. I want them to have friends that they went to preschool with. I want them to have kids they can hang out who are my friends' kids. Because you want to be able to have different buckets to pull from depending on what you need. And the same thing goes for adults. So some of the different types are obviously spouse, partner, family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, special interest groups, group members, and even online community has been a huge thing in the last couple years. And there's a lot of research that shows you can still get a really big boost there's the added a little bit edge of that in-person connection, but if you can't get the in-person, online is also awesome. And it is so great to be able to connect with people with similar interests who you might not find right here in Tampa. Or maybe they're in Tampa, but everyone's busy and the easiest place to connect is online. But being able to make sure that you have a couple different buckets to pull from allows you to never feel like there's no one there. Is you always have something or someone to go to. And the way that I kind of think about it is concentric circles. We have kind of our closest people right next to us, or even maybe it's just us in that middle circle. And then out, we get the opportunity to connect with other people, but they might not be our all the time people. Or there might be certain things we don't talk about with them because we have differing beliefs or different views. It doesn't mean there's not room for them. There can still be room for them, but they might just be a little further out. Again, shared with permission from a client, I had one client who was having a really hard time finding some different areas, is most of his friends were from work. And that was his main thing, and he's like, I can't talk about work all the time. I need other things, and one of the things he was really into was indie rock music, and none of his friends were into it. He found a group who was interested in going, and all he does with them is go to different concerts. Like St. Pete has a lot of different cool ones. That's the only thing he does with these friends. But he loves it, and it works for them. And it's this idea of they don't necessarily know what's going on in his work life or what's going on in his family life or his home life, but they do these concerts together. And it's something that there's always someone who's up for it, and he has a buddy in those things. And so recognizing, letting someone into your circle doesn't mean they come into the innermost circle. Over time, they might get there, but it's great to have different people. It might be that you have a real active friend, and they're the one who's always up for going on a walk somewhere, or maybe a friend who's really into coffee shops, who always wants to try the new restaurant or the coffee shop. Great. Make room for them. And again, we'll talk about setting boundaries to make sure that it continues to be something fulfilling for you, but we want to make sure that we have some variety in this. It can be kind of overwhelming to start new relationships, so I want to talk about that for a minute. First and foremost, get involved. There are so many great opportunities. It's harder as an adult, 100% harder as an adult, to make new friends. But being able to kind of start getting involved in a certain way or in a certain environment where there is a common ground is one of the best places to start. Volunteermatch.org is an awesome website that has volunteer opportunities, and you can do it by place, you can do it by type of opportunity you want, but that's a great one because if you show up and there's maybe 5 other people there and you don't click with any of them, you never have to see them again. But you've still done something that hopefully is somewhat fulfilling to you, is hopefully helpful to the community, things like that. Volunteering is an awesome one for both purpose and community. The other one is Meetup. Is anyone familiar with meetup.com? So meetup groups are awesome. So meetup.com, they have them in tons of different cities. Tampa has a very big meetup community. And you can go on their website and click what you like. Do you like movies? I actually had a colleague that I worked with in grad school, and he was kind of doing the whole dating thing and figuring out how to find connections. Ended up doing a meetup group. He's a psychologist now too. Ended up doing a meetup group that was based on the Marvel movies. And so anytime a new Marvel movie would come out, this group would go. He met his wife that way. And it wasn't even because she was in the group, her brother was in the group. And he connected with the brother, they hung out, all of a sudden sister gets introduced, and they hit it off. So this idea of cast a wide net. So being able to get involved, again, meetup groups have, the new restaurant that you want to go to. It might be that a group's going there, going to museums, going to movies, different things like that. If you want to start a meetup group, you can. But just ways to kind of get involved. And then saying yes. Say no when you need to say no. Don't burn yourself out, but if it's something where you're on the line a little bit, say yes. The way that I tend to describe any emotion, but specifically anxiety in situations like this, is you're the driver of the bus. So when we're talking about emotions, you're the driver of the bus, all your emotions are in the back of the bus. So if I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, oh, I don't really know anyone, it might be kind of awkward, I don't know if I really want to go, that's anxiety in the back of the bus saying, this is going to be uncomfortable, you're not going to like it, turn the bus around, we're going home. I get to be the one to talk back to that though and say, well, hang on a second. I remember I was in that talk and they said to say yes, and I probably should at least try. What's the worst that could happen? I'm uncomfortable for a little bit. I never see these people again. Okay, now I've just talked back to the anxiety. The anxiety can cool off a little bit. And I've now sent a message to my body that says, I can do it even if it's uncomfortable. And again, worst case, uncomfortable, come home, never go again. Or pick something else. But I need to be able to talk back to those things to decide, am I saying no because I'm scared? Is it fear-based? Or is this a love-based thing? I'm just burnt out right now. I don't have space for that. If it's a love-based decision, that's very different. If it's fear-based, it tends to not serve us so well. Being approachable. This is a big one. So many times, I would guess if you walk around, say you walk around an airport, you will see everyone looking down. No one's making eye contact. Everyone's on their tablets, on their phones, zoning out, listening to podcasts. Totally fine. But if you're at a place where you want to make more connections, be approachable. If you're going on a walk, say hi to the neighbors. If you're in the grocery store, smile at people. If you're sitting in a coffee shop that you normally sit in, say hi to the people who are working there. Say hi to people who are coming in. Being approachable, just smiling and being open, you'd be surprised at how many even just small conversations that you can have. Beyond that, we want to be able to move out of the small talk. One of the best ways to do that is self-disclosure. So say, for example, I have a neighbor who I always see, but we've never really talked, and maybe we're like around the same age or have kind of similar age kids, and it's always just, hey, how are you, how are you? Fine, and then we move on. Being able to start with something small. When they say, oh, how are you doing? Saying, you know what, we're actually gearing up for a trip, and it's kind of chaotic, we're going to this place. Have you ever been there? It's a little bit of self-disclosure on my part, but it opens the door for them to be able to say, oh man, no, I haven't, but when we travel with our little kids, this is what we do. It's those little things, because then next week when I come back, they might ask, how was your trip? We've moved beyond it, and it didn't take a lot. It takes one person saying something a little bit more. Travel is always a great one. If you're making small talk, or you want to move beyond small talk with someone, ask them, favorite place they've ever been. You know, we're thinking about taking a trip this year, we're starting to make bucket list idea of trips we want to take, where's the best place you've ever been? People will talk your ear off about that. It's fun. We like to talk about that kind of stuff. So travel's a great one, being able to talk about a new restaurant in town, or like, hey, I'm going to this place, have you ever been? Or I'm looking for a new coffee shop, where do you go? Things like that give the other person an idea that we're interested in knowing about them. We're interested in hearing about them. The idea of staying positive is really important, because the way you start a relationship is often the way a relationship is going to continue. You can always repair, but my guess is we all know the people that whenever we talk to them, it's a downer. It's what went wrong, or what wasn't good, or what happened at the weather, or the sports team, or the politics, or things like that, is it drags us down. And if we want to start a new relationship and we want it to be positive and fulfilling, we want to make sure to stay away from that. It is so easy to connect with people on things that you both hate. It's low-hanging fruit. So it makes sense of why we do it, because it's a common enemy or a common issue to grumble about something together. It's much harder to find something positive to talk about, but it's worth the effort. Because when you walk away from a conversation that is positive and uplifting, you feel so different than when you walk away from, oh, we just grumbled about all of this stuff that wasn't going well. So recognizing when you're making new connections, trying to stay positive and steering the conversation in that way as you can. We're going to come back to this idea of expressing gratitude, but this is huge. And in starting new relationships, or even fostering connections with people, tell them what you appreciate about them. Even if it's the neighbor of like, oh my gosh, your dog is so cute. I love seeing your dog every day. Or you always have a big smile on your face. It's always a joy to see you. Those kinds of things, the little pieces of gratitude or appreciation, or like, you know, I noticed you took my garbage cans in the other day, or you reminded me about something. Thank you, I so appreciate that. The little things is a great way to, again, continue to foster relationships, because it feels good for us to express good gratitude. It always feels good to be noticed for something that someone's grateful for that we did. My guess is some of you will be able to name some of these before we even get to them, but I want to talk about traits of likable people. My guess is we all want to be likable. It's good to want to be likable. We want to be genuine, obviously, but there are certain traits that likable people tend to display. And so there was a UCLA study that had about 500 adjectives that the subject rated these 500 adjectives based on their perceived influence on likability. Now, as you might guess, even though we tend to think these things are important, as you would probably guess, top-rated adjectives had nothing to do with being outgoing, intelligent, or attractive. That's not what makes someone likable. What the top adjectives were about sincerity. Is a person genuine that you're talking to? Transparency. Are you getting more than just surface level? And capacity for understanding in another person. emotional intelligence. Can you talk to someone and get a feel for what they're interested in talking about or what you might be able to connect on? So that idea of emotional intelligence, kind of the social aspect of emotional intelligence, that's what I'm talking about here. So people who have high emotional intelligence, have that high sociability piece, they call people by name. Do you guys know people like that, who always call you by name? It stands out, especially when you first meet them and then you're saying goodbye, you just met them and they say, oh, Eric, it was so nice to meet you. It's like, oh, I don't remember their name. But trying to do it, making it a point. Again, this gives you action items in different situations of, okay, how can I remember their names? Is it like a mnemonic? Do I need to say, okay, Erica likes elephants. Okay, that'll help me remember. Little things like that. You know, Bob's wearing the blue shirt. Things like that, and call people by name. It can feel uncomfortable at first, but it is one of the top things that will help people feel connected with you because they feel seen by you. Admitting personal flaws and mistakes, it doesn't need to be the Debbie Downer side of things of, oh, life is so miserable, here's all the things I've done wrong. But man, it's nice when someone comes in with the confidence to show their flaws. Because people who are not confident can't do that. If I'm not feeling confident, I'm not going to come in and show you what's wrong. But if I'm feeling confident in myself, I might say, oh man, I don't think that was the best presentation I ever gave. I coughed a lot, or I ended up skipping a slide, or things like that. But that comes from a place of confidence of knowing it doesn't make me a bad person, it doesn't make me a bad professional. We all mess up. And so being able to share with people of like, oh man, like I actually really did terrible in math, so you're going to have to explain that to me again. Or can you dumb that down for me because I do not speak that language? That's fine. And better that than try to put on a persona that says, I know everything. Those people aren't that fun to talk to. So being able to admit personal flaws and mistakes immediately exudes some confidence, ironically, and also connects people to us and makes us human. Finding and emphasizing similarities, my guess is that's one you guys could have picked. Find things that you can connect with them on. If you're talking sports and it's totally falling flat, go to the travel. I'm telling you, travel is the place to go. Go to the travel, go to where you grew up. Have you always lived in Tampa? Has it always been this hot here? Things like that, being able to talk about things that you can focus on either similarities or even just things that you're somewhat interested in, so you can express interest and you can ask questions. Importantly though, listen. Listen. We get so, and there's so many studies on this, but we get so focused on what we're going to say next, we miss what that other person's saying. I would rather lose my train of thought because I'm focusing on what the other person's saying than be so ready to say what I was saying and totally take the conversation off track because I haven't heard what they've said and they've steered in a different direction. So being able to listen intently and then asking follow-up questions. Usually people like talking about themselves, and if they don't like talking about a certain thing, you'll be able to feel it of like, okay, you know, they don't really want to talk about their parents, let's talk about where they live now, or what they do for their job, or how old their kids are, or things like that. But if you can start putting some feelers out there, you'll probably get a hit of something that they're interested in talking about and follow that train of thought. The other piece, and this goes back to even just using the names, is treating acquaintances like good friends. So an easy example of this is if you've just met someone at an outing and a gathering of some kind, and it's, you know, a woman named Lisa, and you're talking to Lisa, and then someone else comes up, and her name's Caroline, and you say, oh, Caroline, I'd love for you to meet Lisa. Even though you just met Lisa, she now feels connected. She feels like she's part of something because you're treating her like you've known her for a long time. It's not about being disingenuous, but it's about saying, oh, you know, she was just talking about she loves horses. I know you love horses. I wonder if you guys have ever ridden at the same place. That way you're immediately pulling them in on specific things, and it shows you've listened, you've connected with them, and you're able to kind of follow up. When it comes to transforming this into healthy relationships, we want to make sure to be intentional about the types of relationships we're going into. It's important to know, I'm not a believer that the relationships you've had in the past or things like that dictate your future relationships. If they were either broken or really tense or codependent relationships growing up, you are not destined to have those forever, especially if you can recognize them. That might be what feels most comfortable, but when you can recognize that's not the healthiest, you can move to a different place and start getting comfortable with something new. So I want to talk about 3 different types of relationships. And these go to attachment styles. If you're familiar with attachment styles, I'll tell you kind of which ones are which. So this is insufficient boundaries. There's this big overlap between two people. So a lot of times when I show this to clients, they say, yeah, that's good. There's this big connection, it's kind of two people or this one piece, but what we want is we want not that insufficient boundary where, because what happens here is that it gets really scary. So if this is me and you, go away. By choice or circumstance, even, say his partner has a basketball team that he's a part of. So he goes away to do that. If you look, I'm now half a person. That overlap takes away part of me. So if that person by choice or by circumstance is now doing other things, I'm fearful. It's a threat to me. And that means if that person's not okay, I'm not okay. If that person has other things, it is a threat. So this is codependency. And it can lead to kind of anxious, ambivalent attachment. And so this idea of kind of too close, too far, too close, too far, and just this idea of being overly enmeshed or connected. So the positive of this is when it's going well, it feels good. You feel like you're in sync with the person. It can feel really, really connected. We're right on the same page. But the cons so outweigh that. And there's a way, and I'll talk about this one last, but there's a way to get to a place where you can still get that warm, comfortable, content feeling without the fear behind it. Because this is a very fear-based situation. It also, again, this idea that if you're not okay, I'm not okay plays in, is like my happiness ends up being so reliant on whether or not the other person's okay because we're so interconnected. The next piece, and this is one I saw a lot when I work with clients who have PTSD, whether it be at the VA or in my private practice, is over-exaggerated boundaries. I'm not letting anyone close. And a lot of times from PTSD, there's fear involved in that, of either I'm gonna hurt them or they're gonna hurt me. There's this big wall, and it doesn't even, it can be physical. It can be someone who stays on their own. You can be living in the same house with someone who has this kind of over-exaggerated boundary. And they might be really good at the small talk, they might be really good at kind of letting you in a little bit, but they'll keep you at an arm's length talking about what they want to talk about. Is getting any closer to them, you get a wall. And again, very fear-driven. So it can feel safer for that person. Like we talked about at the beginning, we need connection. We need connection and community. This doesn't allow you to have that. So again, there can be a reason. This is avoidant attachment. There can be a reason for this, but the hope would be is that we can push past that and see if there's any kind of core beliefs that say either I'm going to hurt someone if I get close to them and they're going to hurt me, is how do we focus on the here and now? Who's one person you can open up to a little bit, and little by little being able to break down that boundary in a safe way that doesn't feel too overwhelming. So the hope would be that we get here. So this is the healthy boundary. This is secure attachment. The idea of I'm a whole person, you're a whole person, we're connected, we're touching, we feel very in sync, but we are whole people. So if you have other interests, that doesn't threaten our bond. That doesn't threaten me, it doesn't threaten our relationship. It's great, you go do your thing, come back and tell me all about it. I'm gonna be doing my stuff too, and then we're gonna come back together. So this idea, it can feel scary if you're used to one of the other areas of attachment or styles of attachment. It doesn't feel close enough for people who are used to codependency. But again, little by little, getting comfortable with it is the most important part. One of the things that I notice a lot in working with clients who have had maybe more tense or traumatic either models for relationships or actual relationships of their own growing up, even if they can say, I know that was unhealthy, it's what feels comfortable. So when they get into a securely attached relationship, they freak out. It feels so uncomfortable. This isn't what it's supposed to feel like. This person's supposed to be yelling and screaming and throwing things when they're passionate about something or excited about something. Or this person, they didn't even try to chase after me when I went down the street. Being able to say, okay, well maybe that wasn't the model that was the best approach. Maybe the communication that they're trying for, maybe it's not as overt and aggressive, but maybe that's okay. But when you're used to volatile, steady feels scary because it's okay, well we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. So again, it takes time, it takes being able to look at it, it takes being able to talk about it or talk to a third party mediator to say, okay, this feels weird, but I think we're getting into a closer, a healthier place. And this isn't just for romantic relationships. My guess is we can all identify a friend who's maybe either has over-exaggerated boundaries or some more codependent tendencies. And some people do it just in friendships and not in romantic relationships. But getting an idea of, okay, how do I become that whole person? How do I foster that with community and connection that I'm making to make sure all of the relationships are looking like this. Okay? There's actually a really good book called Attached. It's geared more towards love relationships, but it talks a lot about attachment styles, where those things come from. It's by Amir Levin and Rachel Heller. Again, geared more towards romantic relationships, but a really good one if you want to explore past relationships and how they might be impacting current. Any questions? Okay. Setting boundaries is huge. And I want to talk about some specific ways to do it because there's some nuance to it. Knowing your limits is number one. Just as much as you want to be able to learn how to say yes, you want to be able to learn how to say no. Especially if it's someone who's draining you and you don't have the energy for it. Giving yourself permission to say no and then being assertive about it. Being able, there's two ways to do this, and I want to talk about the two different ones. One is a firm boundary of just saying, sorry, I can't do that. If it's, okay, can you sign up for this organization, or can you head up this? Sorry, I don't have the bandwidth to do that right now, or I can't put my all into it right now, so I'd rather not do it. Please keep me in mind in the future, or I'll reach out when I can. That's perfectly fine. My guess is we all know, and this was me when I was growing up, I call myself a recovering perfectionist, but this idea of you're sitting in a groove, and they're saying, okay, well, who's going to do this part? And it's crickets. Fine, I'll do it. There's that idea of like, well, this is uncomfortable, no one else is volunteering, I need to do it. And if you can do it, great. But if it's something you're going to resent, and you're going to grumble about, and it's going to make you stretch too thin, don't do it. If it's a yes, make it a big yes, but if it's a no, make it a firm no. The other piece, the silent boundaries, is something I talk about a lot with clients that I think can be really, really useful as a tool. And it's saying no without really saying no. So an easy example of this is if you have a friend who always wants to meet up and you don't have the bandwidth for it, or it's just a friend who is maybe more draining and you don't have the space for it right now, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't need to be a firm, I'm never gonna, I'm gonna ghost this person, or I'm gonna start fading out and never talk to them. But being able to say something along the lines of, hey, this week's kind of crazy, or this month's kind of crazy. You know what, February 4th though, I have open, do you want to grab coffee? Make it something that works for you. Or if it's, I know I want to go on a walk, so I'm just gonna ask them to join me for a walk. Two birds with one stone. This person gets their needs met of connection. I have the opportunity to connect with them. That feels comfortable for me. That's a silent boundary. Because you're saying no to one thing, but you're giving them the yes. This is a great one with family, with extended family, with in-laws, things like that, who say, hey, we want to come over and see the baby. I would love for you to come over. Today's not great. Can you come on Friday? It's a no, but it's a yes. And so being able to use those silent boundaries is a great way to connect with whatever it is that person is asking of you, but to do it in a place where you're not going to build resentment. Because if you start saying yes to a bunch of things that don't fit for you, all of a sudden you're resentful, but that's on you. You're the one who said yes. And so again, the hope is that by using something like these silent boundaries, or even just being assertive, you're able to carve out the time you need for you, so when you do show up for those things, you can be fully present. And you can be the friend or the parent or the coworker that you want to be. Okay? Conflict is something that comes up a lot in my private practice. Friendships, romantic relationships, we have conflict. It happens. There are two different entities, at least, if not more. They are going to have differing opinions. If you have been to a talk of mine, you have heard of the shoulds. You're probably so sick of the shoulds, and that's wonderful because you're going to catch them when you say them. So the word should is my least favorite word in the English language. The reason being is that when we turn it inward, we've got guilt and shame. Easy example, I have 10 things to do today. I get 7 of them done. I go to bed tonight and I'm thinking, oh, I should have gotten all 10 things done. I'm beating myself up about that. I'm thinking about how I shouldn't have done this today, or I shouldn't have taken so long doing that, or I shouldn't have slept in so long. And I'm not getting anywhere productive. But I've now got guilt and shame. Tomorrow I'm waking up with that feeling of guilt and shame, like I'm already behind. When we get rid of the should, just semantics, and I say, I wish I had gotten all 10 things done, I got 7 things done, here's what I'm going to do tomorrow to rearrange my day to get those 10 things done, or those 3 that I missed, done. So I can check all 10 off my list. Now, I'm not saying everything's great and wonderful, I'm glad that happened, but what I am saying is, there's nothing I can do about it now, except move forward. And I either accept it, or I have some action around it. So that's the internal piece. What's more even relevant today is this idea of externalized resentment. Externalized shoulds. It's resentment, immediately. The moment you put a should on someone else, you get a little seed of resentment. They should have done this. They shouldn't have done this. It is built into the word. So if I have a situation where my husband's coming home and he was supposed to help with the kids and he was supposed to get them bathed and ready for bed because I had to talk like this, and I get home, they're not bathed, they're not fed, and I say, oh, you should have gotten all that done. I'm immediately mad. I'm resentful, I'm angry about it, changes the whole tone of everything for the evening. Instead, again, I'm not saying, oh great, honey, I'm so glad you didn't get any stuff done that we talked about. It's, okay, I wish you had gotten it done, you hadn't. What do I need to do? Action in the moment right now is we gotta get these kids in bed. We gotta get them bathed, let's do that. Focus on that first. Okay, now the next step of action, the acceptance is, you didn't get it done. The next step of action, once the kids are in bed, is, all right, honey, what happened? Where did we go wrong? That was a lot. And that gives us a chance to talk about it. But if I stick with the shoulds, if he should have done it, it's eating me up inside. He knows I'm mad, but it doesn't actually change anything, versus me being able to say, okay, wish he had done it, didn't, what do we need to do now? Now again, we're in action mode. So that's a great way to start with the conflict navigation. The other piece though is sometimes it's just acceptance. Sometimes there are family members or maybe neighbors or different people in our environment who do stuff that we're not happy with, and we're thinking, man, they shouldn't have done that, they shouldn't have said that, they shouldn't act that way. Sometimes we might be able to say something about it. Sometimes it might not be any of our business. And us putting our expectations on them doesn't help. So being able instead to say, I wish they didn't do that, I gotta accept it, because they aren't changing at this point, but what do I want to do about it? Maybe I don't want to spend as much time with that person. Maybe I need to bite my tongue in some of those situations and then go for a run after so I can work out some of that energy. But now I'm doing something with it versus just they shouldn't or they should do this. It's I wish they didn't do this. They do. Now what? So when we can recognize those shoulds, and again, I talk about this all the time both with clients and in big talks like this, if there is a should in your mind, it is going to escalate the emotion. It's going to escalate the intensity of the emotion. So catch yourself. And in all the talks that I give, I have yet, and I always give this as an open invitation, if you don't do the shoulds, over the course of the next week, if you realize, I never do that should thing, email me because you are an anomaly. And I want to know what you're doing differently. It pops up so much once we start catching it. And I have clients who will sit there and they'll say, oh yeah, I shouldn't have, sorry, I wish I didn't, and they'll start catching themselves. But once you start catching yourself, it changes everything because it puts us back in the driver's seat and we get to figure out what to do with it.
Shoulds are very free-flowing when you're raising children.
Mm-hmm.
You should pick up your clothes and put them in the
100%.
hamper. You
Yep.
should put this in the dishwasher
Yep.
instead of leaving it out overnight with peanut butter on it.
Exactly,
You know
and
anything
even
about
being able to say, okay, I wish you were doing that, you're not. We gotta fix the system. As opposed to just putting that should, and I talk about this in the emotional intelligence talk that I do on kids, is this idea of we don't want them feeling the should. Is, you shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't do this, is being able for them to be able to say, okay, I know that this is what's expected of me, how do I get it done? As opposed to just the guilt and shame piece. The next one is this idea, and this is something, again, I talk a lot about with clients, when it comes to people in our home, specifically partners, spouses, figuring out which things are roommate issues and which things are relationship issues. Being able to say, okay, organizational stuff. Your spouse's inability or disinterest, or even kids' disinterest in putting their laundry in the hamper and they leave it instead on the couch or on the bed, that's a roommate issue. That is not them sending you a signal that they don't love you. That is their organizational style versus your organizational style. So treat it like a roommate issue. Roommate issues don't have the emotion that relationship issues have. This idea of, okay, if my husband for some reason, if I'm going to bed early and he decides that he wants to watch the football game on full blast in the room next door. Roommate issue, right? Think about anything that would have happened when you had a roommate back in the day or things like that. If it's a roommate issue, talk about it like a roommate issue. Here's my needs, here are your needs. What do we need to do? When we start equating that or kind of conflating it with relationship issue, we start worrying about the stability of our relationship when it's really just a roommate issue. So be able to separate those things as they come with family members just to make sure that, again, you aren't conflating those two things. I statements is something that, is anyone familiar with those? Anyone heard about this? It can feel silly at first, hugely, hugely helpful though. So an I statement, and this is really well known in kind of psych literature and things like that in terms of relationships and communication. All it is I feel blank when you blank because blank. So instead of, why are you always late? You're so disrespectful, which if someone tells me that, immediately I have my guard up. Immediately I'm in a combative and defensive place. The I statement is, I feel disrespected when you're late because it feels like you don't value my time. That's a conversation starter. That immediately brings the other person to a place of saying, hopefully, I totally didn't mean to disrespect your time. I didn't realize that that's what you were feeling when I'm running late. Let me explain why I'm always late. It actually has nothing to do with you, but now that I know that that's why you feel, what it makes you feel, I am going to try to show up earlier, because now I know about the feeling versus feeling like you're telling me I'm this terrible person. So another example, you always stick my nose in my business. That's a you statement. I feel frustrated when you ask a lot of personal questions because it feels like you're not respecting my privacy. So that idea of, if you're going in with a you statement, you're going to get a negative reaction. Unless you have a crazy sympathetic partner who can look through that. It immediately gets our hackles up when someone says, you did this, or you're doing this. Because usually, we're not trying to be terrible people. We're doing the best we can with what we have. And so when someone comes at us with something like that, it doesn't fit with what we know about ourselves. But if that person says, this is how it made me feel, totally different way to approach it, and totally different way to talk about it. Going along with that, I want to talk about the 5 parts of an effective apology. This becomes really important in fostering relationships. Again, there's conflict that happens. We do things that we don't mean to do. We accidentally hurt people. And being able to repair it versus saying, well, I'm just going to walk away from that one. Being able to repair it becomes really important. Being able to repair it sufficiently. So that's this idea of an effective apology. So I'm going to walk through the 5 steps and I'll give you an example. So clear and specific, I'm sorry statement. Specific being one of the main points here. An empathy statement acknowledging the full impact of one's actions on the other person. I realize how this impacted you. A description of the motivations leading to the offending action, why I did what I did. So I'm going to explain myself a little bit, not to rationalize it away, but to kind of explain. I'm not a terrible person, this is why I did it. This is the most important, and this is the part we leave off a lot. A statement identifying how similar situations will be avoided in the future. This is where trust comes in. Because if I have someone telling me I'm sorry, but they're not telling me how they're going to change it, I don't have much faith in that apology. But if I know they're saying why it's not going to happen in the future, I have a little more confidence that they've thought about it and they have a plan. And then the request for forgiveness. So I'll walk you through this. So, easy example. So 1, I'll start with this. I'm sorry for not taking out the trash this morning after you asked. 2, I understand that by not taking out the trash, you felt frustrated, disrespected, and unheard. I'm understanding from an empathy standpoint. 3, I didn't mean to make you upset, and in all honesty, I got caught up in another activity and slipped my mind. 4, this is that important part, in the future, I'm going to write it down or I'm going to set an alarm so that I don't forget it again. 5, please forgive me, is there anything else we need to do to feel finished with this? That is so much more effective than, sorry I didn't take out the trash, I'll do better next time. It's being able to say, this is how I'm going to make it better next time. Same thing, okay, I'm always late. Here's what I'm going to do next time. I was talking to you about this earlier. I'm going to tell myself that it's 15 minutes earlier that I need to be there next time. And that way, in my calendar, my alarm's going to go off, I'm going to get ready to go, and I'm going to make it so, again, I don't want you to feel disrespected in that way. And if I'm running late, I'm going to call you and tell you why, so you're not sitting there waiting for me. There are so many ways that when we can stick, especially with this number 4, that we can repair things in a way that people believe. And then we can stick with it because we've now put some action into it as well. All right, has anyone heard of the 5 love languages? Okay, they're awesome. So the 5 love languages, it was developed by Gary Chapman, who he's a psychologist and then also has a seminary background as well. So there's a religious aspect throughout the book, but even if that's not a great fit for you, there's so much that you can get out of it. 5 love languages, very simple. It's the number 5, lovelanguages.com, and they have the quiz there. Essentially what his work has done is shown that we tend to give and receive love within these 5 different areas. And by taking the quiz, you can see where they rank. So some people have 2 way up at the top, and then the other ones fall way down at the bottom. Or maybe they have 4 way up at the top, and then maybe gifts is way down low. The most important part to recognize is through the research that Gary Chapman did, he realized we speak from the language we want to hear. So if quality time is mine, I'm going to start acting that way towards friends, towards loved ones, towards spouse, towards kids, because I'm thinking, oh, that's what I like. Of course they'll like this. It's not always the case. It's actually pretty rarely the case. We want to be able to know what partner, what friends, what kids need to feel connected and loved so that we can be more efficient at connecting with them. As opposed to casting this wide net, if I know that my mother-in-law really likes gifts, I'm not going to waste as much time on, asking if she wants me to pick up the laundry for her, things, or the dry cleaning. I'm going to think of a really unique gift for her for Christmas, because that's going to be more meaningful to her. Or if I know that she doesn't care at all about gifts, I'm going to ask if she wants to go grab coffee, because quality time maybe is her thing. Is we can get so much more specific versus, again, casting that wide net. So with partners, this is great. What I usually recommend, well, let me just give you an example. So words of affirmation is positive, saying positive things, little things, big things. I appreciate you, you do this really well. I'm really proud of this part that you're doing. Acts of service, picking up the dry cleaning, doing the laundry, taking the trash out, things like that. Gifts doesn't have to be expensive. It can be, hey, I got this keychain for you at the airport because it made me think of that time we went on this trip, or whatever it might be. Quality time, spending time together, not just sitting and watching TV, but actually some quality time. And then physical touch doesn't just have to be physical intimacy or sex. It can be hand-holding, hugs, things like that. So when you know where you fall, not only can you express that to partner and catch them being good, of, oh, it meant so much to me that you took Saturday afternoon, you didn't have to work, and we got to hang out. I love that quality time. That's when I feel most connected to you. Great. Being able also to ask them what theirs is. What I usually recommend for couples is to take the quiz every year on your anniversary. Super easy to remember. Anniversary gift to each other, take it because it changes. So my husband and I have been together a little over 20 years. Started dating when we were 17. There has been a lot of change. I mean, it would have been quality time back in the day, acts of service when we had little kids and I needed extra help from him and things like that. So it changes over time. And so you want to make sure that you're catching yourselves where you are in that moment with whatever the season is that you're in. And it can change a lot. And if you keep operating, if my husband kept operating on the one that was maybe when we were in college and it was more quality time, and I'm sitting here saying, please take the trash out. Please help me with the kids with dinner. Please go grab this for me. Those things are things that he could be doing that he doesn't even realize, oh, that's actually come closer to the top of the list. Maybe even quality time's still up there, but this one actually made leaps and bounds past these other ones. I can speak that language too. The other piece here of note is that this is also great for kids and teens. There's a quiz on there for teens, and then for 8 and under, it's more of kind of an evaluation that you do with them. It's kind of like asking them some questions and things like that. My guess is most of the time, if it's grandkids or kids, you can tell what they like. Do they want to sit there and talk your ear off about the baseball cards they got? Do they want to just sit and snuggle in your lap? You can probably tell. But it's a great thing to be able to, again, feel that you're really connecting with people and for them to feel that you're really connecting with them as well. This is another one that comes up in a lot of talks that I give because it's so important, and we're going to do a real quick video if we have time on this. So I want to talk through this just real briefly. These are all benefits of gratitude and its impact on happiness. Gratitude is one of the biggest game changers in terms of quality of life. If you have a will significantly increase your quality of life. There's a lot of indicators in the research that all of these areas improve when we can just notice the things that we're grateful for, the things that are going well. It could be the simplest things. It could be, I didn't hit any red lights today, or it was a little warmer and I wanted some warmer weather today. I had a great cup of coffee. But being able specific to the day to identify things that are going well has huge positive implications. Within romantic relationships specifically, there's a lot of research that feelings of gratitude are the most consistent predictor of marital quality. The higher the gratitude, the higher the marital quality. That's huge. It's not about what they do, but who they are. So this is the idea of an identity versus their actions, as opposed to, oh, I really appreciate you doing that. It's, I appreciate you. Or, oh, that was so thoughtful of you to do that. You are a thoughtful person. It's about their identity and being able to connect with who they are. So that cycle of generosity, the way that it kind of works is when we recognize the value in a partner. As opposed to thinking of all the things that we don't like about partner that day, or that rubbed us wrong, or that didn't go well, recognizing what did go well. We have gratitude. We start acting in a caring way with attitudes and behaviors. Partner feels appreciated, and they recognize the value. And around you go. Positive sentiment override is a really important statistic. This is by John Gottman, who has done phenomenal research, real qualitative research on relationships. So much to the point that he can predict within the first 7 minutes of meeting with a couple, whether or not they're going to stay together. He has awesome research. So again, that's John Gottman. He has like the 4 horsemen, which are like the 4 things that can go wrong in a relationship, and if they start going wrong, you want to keep an eye on them, like stonewalling, things like that. But anyway, so his research shows this 5-to-1 ratio, positive sentiment override. For every 1 negative thing we say, this can be towards kids, towards partner, towards neighbor, towards family member, we need 5 positives to balance the scales. For that person to feel positive connection with us. 5-to-1. So it might be, okay, well I gave a little bit of critical feedback to partner, it's probably fine. I also told them that they're still a great partner. 5-to-1. 5 things to outweigh that 1 thing. I think it's just a good thing to keep in mind, is to be aware of, okay, if I'm saying a lot of critical stuff, I've also got to catch them being good. I got to find the things that are positive, or they're going to bottom out in terms of their connection, that positive sentiment within this relationship. And it also goes for kids. If you have a kid who's going through a hard time, the more you can focus on that positive and catch them being good, the more they recognize, okay, I am a good kid, I do good things. State of the Union is kind of the term that I use, this idea of just weekly check-ins with couples that I always recommend. Sometimes they do it over a glass of wine on Friday night, sometimes it's Saturday morning, sometimes it's Sunday afternoon, but it's, what do you need from me this week? What do I need from you this week? What went well this past week? What didn't go so well this past week? You can catch so many things that way, as opposed to just kind of skipping through and weeks go by and all of a sudden I'm building that resentment of the shoulds, versus saying, okay, this part, we never got a chance to talk about it, but that was kind of wacky, I didn't really love that. This actually went really well. Or, I really need your help this day and this day next week. Is that going to work for you? How are we going to make that work? So that way you feel like you're on the same page. Okay. I'm going to do quick video. If you do need to leave, feel free. We're just about at an hour. This is the last part though, and so it's about a 7-minute video. This is the importance of gratitude. And it's a great video. Oh, let me make sure. I might need you over here, Matt, to help me with that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, unless I don't remember how to do it.
It was system preferences.
Yes, okay, and then sound, right?
Yep, audio.
That's one of the kids how to do it.
Let me grab HDMI.
Yeah.
Oh, look at you, Erica.
I won't remember tomorrow.
What makes you happy? Having fun? Hanging out with friends? Delicious food? Making money? Well, consider this. Psychologists have scientifically proven that one of the greatest contributing factors to overall happiness in your life is how much gratitude you show. Yeah? Think about that. Go ahead and marinate on it for a second. You can thank me later if you want. It'll make you feel better according to this study. You go ahead and click on it and read it if you want. Or you can keep watching because we read it and we thought it might be fun to test out for ourselves. We gathered a selection of volunteers to act as our subjects. First, we gave them a test. They didn't know what we were looking for, but it gave us a pretty good idea of their current level of happiness. We asked them to close their eyes and think of somebody who was really influential in their life, somebody who did something really amazing or important for them. We had them write down as much as they could about why this person was so important. Now, a lot of them thought at this point the experiment was over, until we really put them on the spot and tried to get them to call that person and read what they wrote about them. Thank you, Jessica. We're gonna have to have you call your mother. So who is that right person for you?
Person is my sister, Erica.
We're gonna give Erica a call.
Okay.
Who'd you end up picking?
Friend of mine, Craig Ains.
Her name is Dora.
My college accounting instructor.
Really? Is this somebody you're still in touch with today?
No, I'm assuming that he's passed on.
That's a
To the
shame.
great beyond.
You up for it?
Yes.
What would you say if we called up Dora?
Oh, we can try, but she lives in Britain.
In Britain?
I don't know number by heart, dude. This is awful.
That's fine. I don't know my mom's number by heart.
If it's true that those who are going on are looking down on us, maybe he read my chicken scratch.
Hey, sweetheart.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
You got a second? Where you at, in the hotel?
I am. I'm in the hotel. You scared me when you asked if I had a second if something's wrong.
No, I'm on like this little TV show, and they told me to talk about the person that influenced me the most, and I picked you, and they're making me call. They're making me call you.
Oh, wonderful!
Hi, you've reached Craig. I'm not here right now.
At the tone, please record your message.
Oh, come on.
Hello?
Hi,
Hi.
Erica. It's me.
All right, so I got to read you this paragraph. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead,
All right.
sweetheart.
All right. The person that influenced me the most would be my mother, Marlo Dawson. She is a single mother of 2. She is a very hard worker and dedicated to her family.
Hey, Craig. This is Loie. This is going to be a funny little voicemail, so I hope you enjoy it.
I'm so sorry for calling you at 4 o'clock in the morning.
I have to read this to you, okay? And you can't say anything, or I don't know. You can respond, but I probably will just keep going. Okay?
Is everything okay?
Yes, but I have to read this out loud to you.
The person who has had the biggest impact on my life outside of Jesus Christ, who is responsible for my existence, was my college accounting instructor. He had a joy and enthusiasm for his job like no other teacher I have ever known.
I love her to death, and she keeps me going with positive talk. She is a woman that knows what she wants and won't give up until it is achieved.
Oh, something. I don't know what. I'm about to cry because that's so beautiful. I have to say that's just wonderful.
I first met Craig on an independent feature film set in Whitefish, Montana. I recently have been sending Craig a lot of positive thoughts as he's suffered a series of health problems. Despite his medical problems, he's continued to work and take pleasure in the small things in life, like sitting quietly with his wife Janine on the porch. Erica is my older sister and my best friend. Sometimes it even feels like we are twins. She's my #1 fan and my #1 supporter. She makes me happy because despite all my mistakes and my decisions, she still loves me no matter what.
Your friendship is everything. And you are one of the most important person in my life.
Even when she has a kid and many children, I will love her more than her kids. Okay, maybe not. I will never forget when she flew 3,000 miles at the drop of a phone call to save me from a breakup.
And being blessed by having a son like you. I love you.
Bye.
Why did you do that to me?
I don't know, because they made me do it.
Thank you for picking up. Bye, sweetie.
And then they're like, here, you're gonna write this letter. And then I wrote like this whole long ass letter, which, you know, I like don't write. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, guess what? Now we're gonna call her and you're gonna read her this letter. And I was like, what the f?
Before we let them go, we gave our subjects one more happiness test. Now, we mixed up and rephrased the questions so they didn't know they were taking the same test twice. For those who took the time to actually write something down but couldn't make the phone call for whatever reason, we saw happiness increase between 2 and 4%. Good, but not exactly mind-blowing. Now, for those who actually picked up the phone and personally expressed their gratitude, we saw increases between 4 and 19%. So either way, expressing your gratitude will make you a happier person. But you want to know something really interesting? The person who experienced the biggest jump in happiness was the least happy person who walked in the door. What does that mean? That means if you're having a particularly tough time, trying this out will more likely have a greater impact on you. Trust me, I'm in a lab coat. In fact, while you're at it, film it and upload it to us, and we'll do something awesome with it. I'm Julian, and this has been The Science of Happiness.
Open cake, subscribe.
All right. So, again, really illustrates the importance of gratitude. gratitude, the benefits of gratitude. My guess is we all felt something watching that. My guess is we all thought of someone watching that. If you thought of someone, I encourage you, reach out to them this week if you can, or even just write about it if you can. I guarantee you, you will not make someone's day worse by reaching out to them and telling them that they had an impact on your life. It could make a huge difference in your feelings of gratitude and connection, and definitely in their feelings of connection with you. So, wanted to leave on that note. Here, watch another video. Wanted to leave on that note. Again, I know we're a little over time, so if you need to go, please go. Any questions for the group? Okay, any questions from your side, Matt?
Not yet, but they're on about a 30-second delay.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there are questions, I will be, he's on the online side, so if there are questions there, I'm happy to answer those. I'll be here for a couple minutes. If you have questions that you want to ask, feel free. Again, I can talk about this stuff all day long. And also, if there's ever anything that I can help with, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm happy to help guide, direct, answer questions.
Will this be available online? Are you saving it, Matt?
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Yeah, as long as Erica's comfortable with her content.
It was
Okay.
a lot of information,
Yes.
so I took notes. But
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
In fact, it'll be on our YouTube channel after this event. So, yep.
And if you want a copy of the PowerPoint, feel free, shoot me an email and I can send you a copy of the PowerPoint if there's anything that you want from there.
One time I was explaining to my wife, because you go to the doctor's office, do you smoke? I said, yes, 7th and 8th grade. And I quit. I was explaining that Joe Munster was one of my best buddies from 4th to the 8th grade. Then I moved down by the high school, and then he came down. And he was trying to quit. I said, Joe, Bunch, I call him Bunch. He says, can I have a drag? I said, no, you're trying to quit. I said, just quit. And he said, I'll show you. He said, you couldn't quit. You smoke more than any of us. And I said, if I wanted to quit, I could quit. And he says, no, you couldn't. I said, watch. And that was the last cigarette I smoked. She said, why don't you call him up and tell him that?
There you go. Yeah, some years of your life. Oh, how funny.
He said he didn't remember it at all. But I said, you had that impact on me, and I just wanted to share that.
I love that. My guess is we all have a story like that, something that sticks in our mind that the other person may or may not remember. Even if they don't remember it, they probably get a chuckle out of it.
Yeah, you did.
And to just know that they had some kind of lasting impact. Absolutely. That's a great story. All right. Well, thank you all for coming.
How grateful we are as a church family to have you regularly offer these kinds of classes. This is probably the 10th one over the last 8 years, 7 or 8 years. So thank you. And thank you all. I hope everybody had a chance to sign in or let us know you were here, because the next time she does a talk, we'll make sure you get invited to come back. Yeah. Where is that sign?
Hey, thanks everybody for watching tonight. Thadeen, Stephanie, Peggy, Nancy, everybody who was on Church Online. There were 5 people on Facebook, a few people on YouTube as well. Thanks so much for watching. If you do have questions though, feel free to drop them still in the chat. I can pass them along to Erica. And if you want any copies of the slides, feel free to let me know. Send me an email at my email address. Again, it's in the chat. Thanks so much for being here tonight, and we'll see you guys the next time. You can watch this video as well on YouTube. It'll live on our YouTube page. Go to youtube.com and just search Hyde Park United Methodist. We'll be there. Like and subscribe to the page. Thanks so much. See you guys next time. Bye.
Yeah. I'm not going to let everything out of my heart.